his personal blog, The Blank Slate, and you can follow him on Twitter at The Blank Slate.
Right. Thank you, Lori, for inviting me here. It's been a little bit since I've been doing AF panels, but I met a lot of my best friends through AF events in the past, and I'm glad to see it's going strong once again. Like Brandon, what I say tonight is my opinion. It does not reflect Cato at all.
There are the two lawyers on the panel.
Legal disclaimer.
But anyway, I hope that we have a very interesting discussion so far, and hopefully I can add a little bit to this. As Lori said, my primary area of expertise is criminal justice. My focus is criminal justice reform, and I think two best things to think about when you're thinking about criminal justice is the front-end problems and the back-end problems. The front-end reforms are going to look something like policing, the laws on the books generally, and front-end diversion of, like in the drug war, where you get busted with a little bit of weed, and they're like, well, if you go to rehab and all this, we'll put you aside, and you won't go to jail. On the back end, that's more dealing with laws like early release, mental health problems, and job training for people after they've been incarcerated. And if you look at what policymakers have been doing a lot recently, it has been focusing a lot on these back-end reforms. For example, Senator Mike Lee of Utah has just passed a Smarter Sentencing Reform Act out of the Senate Judiciary Committee. This gives a little more relief to people caught up in mandatory minimum sentences, particularly in the drug war, nonviolent offenses. And for those who don't know about mandatory minimums, basically prosecutors use these as a cudgel to impose or threaten to impose draconian sentences on drug offenders to get them to plea out and to rat on other offenders. More generally, there was a lot of talk about reentry programs, like regularizing punishments for parole violations and reducing collateral consequences like housing and employment restrictions, and providing mental health assistance, basically to decrease recidivism in people going back into the system. These ideas are particularly salient today because 10,000 people per week are released into society from jail or prison, which is over 650,000 per year. And what's particularly troubling is a large number of these people are going to be concentrated in already economically depressed neighborhoods with little or no infrastructure to support them. And it's further burdening these areas with people who are looking for jobs, but they already have high unemployment. And you're also getting a lot of old people who've been in for 20 years that are coming out and they have no way to support themselves. The programs that have been put forth so far to take care of these are laudable, and I do support them, but they don't go far enough. None of these back-end solutions really address the fundamental problem at the front end, and that is the way in which the government treats the people hanging on to the lowest rung of society is a travesty across the board. Yes, like your typical libertarian, I have a moral and philosophical problem with the drug war. But this isn't really about what I put into my body or the right to do what I want. It's what the government does to people that will affect socioeconomic outcomes. Since the inception of the drug war, with help from the Pentagon, subsidies that pay for assault rifles and armored personnel carriers in West Lafayette, Indiana, the law enforcement has morphed from this sort of walk-the-beat neighborhood-style policing into an aggressive, adversarial, martial-style enforcement. This has led to antipathy between the police and many of the policed. Leaders within the criminal justice community complain about an us versus them mentality that police have now taken against the general public. Nowhere is this truer than in the impoverished areas of our country. In the wake of Newtown and other school tragedies, the push for school resource officers, that's basically cops in the hallways, has gained a lot of support on both sides of the aisle and has garnered support from the White House. The problem with this is that the SROs hasten the school to prison pipeline. So many kids, before they even get a free and clear chance at adulthood, are already getting railroaded into the criminal justice system. Along with this, schools with SROs are more likely to suspend and to expel kids, and which is going to, again, disrupt their education. It's going to make them more likely to engage in the criminal justice system afterwards. This alienates our young, stifles educational progress, and really just sort of lays the groundwork for young people looking at the system and like, I don't think that this society really is what really is going to, if the society is going to treat me like this, you know, why should I buy into it? New York City stop and frisk is another example of government harassment of young poor people, specifically minorities. These invasive frisks recovered only 8,000 guns over the course of 4 million stops since 2002. Now granted, 8,000 guns seems like a lot, but this is an anti-gun program that is producing results at the stunning rate of 0.2% per stop. I mean, in total. You know, if 90% of these stops involved no crime whatsoever, no past warrants, and no civil violation whatsoever. So either the NYPD had no idea what it was doing, or it was targeting kids. And again, if you're going out of your house and you're getting thrown up against the wall and searched, do you really think this is a society that's really going to be open to you? So, and of course, this alienation doesn't just start with their own direct treatment. The White House recently invited families of the incarcerated to an event with Sesame Street and some new characters to basically to address the problem of, with our incarceration problem, 2 million American children have family members that are incarcerated at any given time. And Sesame Street has dealt with this, has brought a character forward, and is trying to tell people how to address their kids when their family members are going away. And I think this is a laudable idea. However, they held it at the White House. And there is one person in this country who has the power of the pen to reunite families from nonviolent offenders, and they have it in his house. You know, and the thing is, he has exercised the pardon power less than any of his recent predecessors of either party. And this brings me to my main point. When you have an educational system, which we touched on earlier, that is failing poor children, rendering them unable or substantially less able to compete in a global market economy, a legal system that treats them and their loved ones differently and unfairly compared to their richer and often whiter national peers, and may have locked up one or more of their parents, siblings, or loved ones. The government is fundamentally mistreating its most vulnerable citizens and making it even harder for them to break out of poverty. So, the back-end criminal justice solutions I mentioned earlier, are crucial. Ex-offenders are coming out of prison to a still recovering economy and likely disadvantaged in education, with the social stigma and the legal limitations of becoming a felon, which we can talk about in Q&A if you like. Not to mention readjusting to life outside and speaking nothing of the horrors that actually happen inside of American prisons. Right on Crime, the Justice Fellowship, and the organizations up here have led the way from the right in fixing these post-incarceral reforms. Senators Mike Lee and Rand Paul have been champions in Congress for this sort of reform. But on the front end, we cannot continue to alienate the poor, trap their children in bad public schools, incarcerate hundreds of thousands of Americans, and really expect to alleviate poverty in any meaningful way. The threshold for which society says it's appropriate to throw a human being in a cage must be higher than it is, and we want to help our least fortunate fellow citizens. Our current system is deplorable, and maintaining the criminal justice status quo will just enable the cycle of poverty among even the most well-intentioned to have a trouble escape.
Thanks to all of our panelists. That was incredibly informative both on the messaging and on the policy side. It's already a little bit past 8, so I guess we'll go ahead and open it up to questions. We have time for a few. You were very eager with your fast hand. If you could identify yourself and then, say your protest statement in the form of a question, that would be appreciated.
All right. So I'm PG. I'm interning at the Cato Institute. Congratulations for your panel. I love your message on how we should focus on the positive for private enterprise rather than denigrating government, however evil it may be. However, for some reason, there's still the stigma that free enterprise is what brought us to the Depression.